part 2 of this Chronicles of Drunagor series. In part 1 we mostly just made an enormous fort out of cardboard boxes, but in this video we finally get to dive into the rules, which is what this series is all about. I'm going to start with a confession, which is that this is actually my second attempt at this video. My first attempt turned out to be far too much like the rulebook. As in, here are the rules for action cubes, and here are the rules for terrain, and if we keep this up for another 3 hours, we might almost be ready to move a hero 3 spaces away from their starting position. In a nutshell, it was insufferable. So instead, I'm going to select a couple of heroes and send them straight out on a quest. A spoiler-free quest, just for this video, naturally. The point is, we're going to start playing almost immediately, and we're going to pick up the rules as we go. The reason I'm telling you this is so that you'll be prepared for the fact that I will be returning to certain topics again and again, and presenting a little more information each time. So even a single topic, such as equipment or monsters, will be scattered throughout these videos, rather than conveniently gathered together like in the rulebook. So if you're looking for a tidy and organised rules reference, you should probably stick to the rulebook. But if you're willing to join me on a little adventure and explore those same rules from the inside of a fetid dungeon, then you've come to the right place. I will be packing a lot of rules into these videos though, and if you're new to the game, this may seem like a lot of information, but you're definitely not expected to completely absorb all these rules at first blush. This will serve as a nice introduction and a foundation from which you can explore gameplay on your own. Let's start by choosing a couple of heroes. I thought that Vaughan the Dwarven Warrior might be a good hero for our party, but ever since starring in the official tutorial scenario, he's become a bit of a celebrity, and his agent won't even return my calls. So instead, we're going to send out Maya, the Human Ranger, from the core box, and Lordrath the Angsty Goth. He's an optional add-on, who lives in his own box because he prefers the solitude. Don't worry if you don't own Lordrath, because there are loads of other characters to choose from. In fact, it's rare to take the shrink wrap off any Drunagor add-on without getting mobbed by a horde of new heroes. Let's take a whirlwind tour of Maya's hero board. As mentioned in the previous video, I'll be using these plastic hero trays, which are an optional add-on. The health track is along the top, and you'll use a pink cube to track the current value. Or the health slider if you're using the hero tray. Obviously that will go down when she takes damage, and up when she gets healed. The highlighted square is her full health, or at least her default full health. Sometimes that value can be modified, though never beyond 16 obviously. Running down the left side of the board we have Maya's 8 starting skills. Each skill has a name, in bold, and beneath that a description of its effect. These descriptions can be intimidatingly terse, but don't worry, we'll get lots of practice at interpreting them. Skills can be activated by putting an action cube of the matching colour on the skill. So I could activate the bear trap skill by placing a yellow cube here. Each skill can only hold 1 cube, so she wouldn't be able to use that skill again until that cube gets removed. There are 4 colours of action cubes: yellow, red, green and blue. They represent the 4 types of action: melee, ranged, agility and wisdom. These 4 types sometimes use an icon for added clarity. The range of an action is usually determined by its colour. For example, yellow melee actions can only target adjacent figures by default, whereas blue wisdom actions have unlimited range and can target anywhere on the game board. Eagle-eyed viewers may notice that Maya's best friend skill, at the bottom of her board, is grey. That's called a passive ability, which doesn't need to be activated with an action cube. It provides some sort of permanent or ongoing benefit. In this case, it kicks in whenever Maya rolls 16 or more on the 20-sided die. The distinguishing feature of most passive abilities is that they're infuriatingly easy to overlook. For example, if Maya ever manages to roll a natural 20, I'll probably be so excited about it being a critical hit that I'll forget all about this passive skill, which activates a pet. Though I do seem to have a special knack for noticing passive skills just after it's too late to use them. On the right side of each hero board are 4 slots for equipment cards. There are 4 types of equipment: weapon, offhand, armour and trinket, and heroes have only 1 slot for each type. Equipment cards display their type icon near the left, so always make sure that this icon matches the slot on your player board. In addition to their type, most equipment cards also have a subtype. For example, this sword is a light weapon. This is important right from the game's setup, because heroes can only equip the subtypes they're proficient with. Each hero's proficiencies are printed on their player boards near the bottom. Maya is proficient with ranged weapons, so she's able to equip this elvish bow. But she can't equip weapons of other subtypes, such as this light weapon. Heroes start the campaign with just 2 pieces of equipment, 1 weapon and 1 armour. These cards are marked as starting gear, so for Maya I'll find and equip the ranged weapon starting gear and the leather armour starting gear. And Lordrath starts with a light weapon, plate armour and a temperament you could sharpen an axe on. Before we send our intrepid heroes on their way, let's move over to the game board and teach them how to move. I'm tempted to just skip this and start playing, but I don't want to risk entering the battlefield with 2 heroes who are stumbling around like giraffes on roller skates. I've set up some trays and map tiles to make an example game board. Unless you've been living underneath a darkness tile, it should come as no surprise that the board has several different elevations, and here we have all 3, from lowest to highest. These are usually referred to as level 0, 1 and 2. Let's place the heroes on the lowest elevation. Let's look at the essential movement rules. These apply to everyone: heroes, monsters, companions, pets and so on. Figures can move both orthogonally and diagonally. So if I give Maya 2 movement points to spend, she might move all the way over here. In fact, just about everything in the game is measured both orthogonally and diagonally, including adjacency. For example, I'll place a skeleton archer here, and he's now adjacent to both our heroes. In fact, he's adjacent to all 8 of these squares. Adjacency may sound like something a boring geometry teacher may bang on about, but it actually plays a pretty important role in this game. It's not quite as important as, say, the shipping label which they put on your pledge, but it's still pretty important. If a square is occupied by a solid object, then unsurprisingly figures can't move through that square. A couple of good examples include chests, which can be looted, and interaction tokens, which can represent just about anything you might interact with. It's not just that you can't end your movement on a solid object, but you're not even allowed to pass through them. Just as importantly, heroes can't pass through squares which are occupied by monsters. And the reverse is also true. A monster can't pass through a hero. So from this position, if Maya wanted to move to be adjacent to Lordrath to whisper something in his ear, she'd need to spend 3 movement points, like this. Note that some actions may include a jump, which lets your hero jump over solid objects. As you'd expect, jump is also good for avoiding hazards, such as lava, darkness tiles, and so on. Also note that allies can pass through one another. So heroes can pass through heroes, and monsters can pass through monsters. For example, if Maya wanted to reach this square from where she is, it would only cost her 2 movement points. Presumably Lordrath steps politely aside as she passes, though that is hard to believe. Okay, so we know that no one can pass through solid objects like chests or interaction tokens, but not every token on the board represents a solid object. A trap token is a good example of an object which figures can step onto. I mean, traps wouldn't be very scary if they were impossible to stand on. Objects you can step onto are called ground objects, to contrast them with solid objects. Fortunately, solid objects and ground objects are pretty thematic, so you can usually guess which category an object falls into. Of course, we'll be seeing plenty of examples on our adventures. It's also good to keep in mind that diagonal movement never gets blocked, as long as the destination square is empty. In this example, the archer can move diagonally to this square with a single point of movement. Figures can always squeeze through the gap. Here's another example in which Maya slips gracefully between a monster on one side and an absence of map tile on the other. Now let's take a quick look at elevation and how it affects movement. Fortunately, this is pretty straightforward. If 2 regions of the board differ by just 1 level, then the change of elevation has no effect on movement, or adjacency. Actually, that sounds like pretty useful information. Let me write that down. For example, Maya could spend 3 points of movement to reach here. And from this new position, she'd be adjacent to all these squares. This applies to monsters as well, not just heroes. So, small changes in elevation don't hinder movement, But when a figure moves all the way from level 0 to 2, or vice versa, in a single step, then it's not quite so effortless. Let's send Lordrath to demonstrate. Hey Lord, climb up that sheer rock face to the north. It'll be easy.
All right, if I must.
It takes him 2 movement points to reach the rock face. And to ascend it, he'll need to spend 1 extra point of movement due to the huge change in elevation. So it costs him 2 movement points to move 1 space. Notice that the upper and lower spaces are still considered adjacent. It just takes some extra effort to climb up there. Hey Lordrath, could you climb back down again?
Seriously? I only just got up here.
Yeah, I want to demonstrate large changes in elevation.
Are you sure? I mean, it looks like a long way down.
Yeah, it'll be fine. Go for it.
All right then.
With gravity on his side, it only takes him 1 point of movement to descend all the way. But unfortunately, there's no such thing as a soft landing.
Ow. Oh, damn it. I think I sprained my ankle.
Yeah, sorry about that. He takes 2 points of unavoidable falling damage. So, to summarise, stepping up 2 levels costs an extra point of movement, and stepping down 2 levels causes 2 points of falling damage. We'll learn more about elevation and how it affects combat later on. Okay, we've met the heroes. We know how to walk, we've tried throwing Lordrath off a cliff, so we're almost ready to begin. We just need to take a quick look at the initiative track. This track determines the turn order over the course of a round. Each hero and each type of monster will have a card somewhere on this track, and the initiative tracker token will move from left to right, first above the track, then below it, activating each card in turn. Before starting a scenario, each player chooses one of the 5 dungeon roles which are printed on the initiative track: Defender, Leader, Controller, Support and Striker. For now, I'm going to give Maya the support role, and Lordrath can be a striker. By the way, initiative cards from the core box have a corrupted version of the hero on the back, which we want to avoid, so make sure that the face-up side is showing a handful of action cubes. Your chosen dungeon role not only determines your place on the initiative track, it also gives you some dungeon role cards with additional skills. At the start of a campaign, you'll get 2 cards, labelled 1 and 2, each containing 2 skills. It's pretty common to place dungeon role cards above your hero board, but here I have a game tray off to one side. So Maya gets 4 support skills, and Lordrath gets 4 striker skills. Each dungeon role also has a 3rd skill card, but they're not available at the start of the campaign, so I'll keep them out of the game for now. Notice that Maya's support role gives her a new passive skill called Bystander. Whenever a hero ends a movement adjacent to you, they gain Shield 1. That involves placing a shield token on their player board. Let's see how long it takes me to overlook that effect. Lordrath also gets a new passive skill, and we'll make sense of that later. The Remove Curse skill has a slot for an action cube, but notice that it can be activated with a cube in any of the 4 colours. Similarly, these skills, from Lordrath's dungeon roll card, can be activated with either a yellow or a red cube. In these situations, it's up to you which colour to use. But as mentioned earlier, the cube's colour will determine the range of the action. For example, yellow represents melee actions, so if Lordrath activated Twin Strike with a yellow cube, then he could target an adjacent square, but no further. We'll be seeing lots of examples of this. And speaking of action cubes, our heroes aren't going to get very far without some of those to spend, so let's remedy that. Each hero's starting action cubes are shown on their initiative card, so we'll grab those from the supply and put them on the hero boards. As if Maya isn't badass enough for wielding a crossbow which looks big enough to pass as a ballista, she also has a couple of pets. Luma, the ferocious looking wolf, and Jinx, who is literally intimidating. I'll keep those pet cards at the top of her player board. Lordrath doesn't have any pets, or if he did, he forgot to feed them and they ran away. Each hero can only have 1 pet on the board at a time, unless you're told otherwise. So Luma and Jinx are destined to never meet, which is probably for the best. And with that, we're finally ready to set off. In the next video, our adventure begins, and here's a quick teaser. This cold winter night finds you warming your travel-weary feet at the hearth of a small parish near the banks of the Black River. Your quiet reverie is abruptly interrupted when the double doors burst open with a crash.